The following story is based on true facts and true events. You're going to hear the story of the red house on the hill and strange events that have occurred in my neighborhood. Straight ahead where the light is shining, just over that ledge, a plane came down from above the red house on the hill and nosedived into a house down below the ridgeline here. Thankfully, nobody was injured. Hi everyone, as my title implies, I'm going to be going over some situations that have occurred here in this area, and the thought occurred to me this morning, is it really the area or is it me? Let's get started. Way back when, early 2000s, I witnessed a horrific accident on the highway. I have uploaded a video about that. I witnessed a gentleman pass away. Over a decade later, after I had moved away and moved back to where I'm at now, my grandmother, she passed away in the home I was raised in that my grandfather built with his own two hands in the 50s. When my grandmother passed away, it was very peaceful. Her whole entire family was there with her. We sang songs, we held her hand, we told her we loved her. Shortly afterward, I would say maybe 5 years or so, my grandfather did pass away, and he did not pass in the same home. He passed away in a new place where he was living. So I wasn't going to invest in the home, even though my grandfather built it. I figured maybe another family member would buy it, but nobody did. So this landlord bought the property. I was in my backyard where I'm sitting today, and at that time my porches weren't screened in yet. So I was sitting out here and I was grilling out for my family. I had some chicken and steak on the grill, and I look up and I see like 25 people running across my backyard. Now I was like, what the heck? So I, was like, what's going on? What are you people doing in my backyard? It was so shocking to me. And none of them would speak to me. So eventually I was just like, get out of here. You don't belong in my backyard. What are you doing? And this one guy stayed behind as everybody kind of left. I didn't see what cars they got into. It almost seemed to me like they were dropped off by a party bus, as many as people as there were. But this one guy stayed behind and he said, oh, I just bought the property and I brought my family up to look at it. And I said, oh, okay, well, this is my yard, so stay out of it. I'm glad to be your neighbor, but you don't have a right to have 20 plus people run through my backyard. I'm trying to grill out here for my family. And he said, oh, well, we were just admiring the view. Now, where I'm at, I'm kind of dipped under a hill, and their house sets up high on a hill. But where I'm at, I don't really have any view other than some big rocks, trees, the usual. Because they're on a hill, they actually have, for a short period of time during the year, they have a slight view of the water, because this is a shoreline community, and they can see the water from their kitchen window. That's only when the trees are not in full bloom, when it's like the dead of winter, things like that. Then they have a slight view of the water. So this gentleman told me that he bought the property. He is going to rent it out. However, at some point in his future, he would be living there and moving his family here because of the view of the water. Even though it's a very little view of the water, he lives in a city at this time and doesn't want to live there after retirement. So he really bought this not just as an investment property, but to live there in a few years. He was planning on it once his kids moved out of the house, and both of them were in high school at the time, and he figured after they went away to college, he would move in. So he proceeded to move in large amounts of furniture. There is an outbuilding on the property, so he locked it up tight with all his furniture, and I saw him drive away, and I didn't see him again for a while. The tenants moved in, and unfortunately, they were really destructive. I don't know if you have experience with this, but when somebody moves in your neighborhood that's a renter and you don't have like an owner living next to you, not everyone, of course, but once in a while you'll get somebody that's just a bad apple. They move in, they don't care about anything because they're renting, they don't own it. So their regular renter was no different. They moved in, and there were about 5 or 6, I think they were college kids, to be honest. They moved into the property. They were driving by my house drunk all hours of the night, acting crazy. They'd get on their rooftop of their car. They would do burnouts nearby. I'd be getting up at 11, 12 o'clock at night, listening to the sound of their tires peeling out. And another neighbor came to me at one time and said, "Do you know what those tenants are doing over there?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea. I try to mind my own business. The loudness at night is really starting to affect me because I can't sleep. So what are they doing? I have no idea." She said they are breaking down cars and selling the car parts. And I said, "Well, is it legal for them to do that? Or are they stealing the car?" From her view, from her yard, I'm fenced in back here, but from her viewpoint, all you could see were car parts strewn across the whole entire yard, the front yard, the backyard. She got in touch with the landlord, and she said, "Hey, if you don't do something about this, I'm going to go to the town and complain about what they're doing here, because it's destroying the value of my property, and I plan on selling my house in the near future." The landlord reacted with care, concern. He came right over, even though he was an hour away where he lived. And he took a look at the property and was in disbelief. He says, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to take these people to court." My neighbor actually went with the landlord to court as a witness. And while he was walking into the courthouse, the tenants that were being evicted were literally shouting at him death threats. The judge, per my understanding, got involved with it and said some things. I wasn't there. I don't know firsthand what was said. However, it got really scary. The landlord told my neighbor that he was sorry he ever bought the house. Some strange things had started happening. But he was going to be getting this tenant out and hopefully getting better tenants next time. My neighbor suggested to him maybe he should run background checks on people and not just, go with the first person who applies for the rental. So the landlord took her advice, and he started creating an application for tenants. The next tenant that moved in immediately unlocked the outbuilding on the property and sold off all of the landlord's furniture. Now remember, the landlord had stored the furniture there in hopes of one day moving in the property once his kids, graduated and he retired, and he was going to be moving into the property. Once he found out that all his furniture had been stolen and sold, he again started eviction proceedings on this tenant. Finally, with the neighbor's help, he drafted a really solid rental agreement and was able to get in a new tenant. This tenant was in the military. She was fantastic. She took care of the whole entire yard, and it sits about on 2 acres. And she did all of this by herself. During this time also, down in the neighborhood, another neighbor disappeared. It was in the news that he disappeared, and he was missing for about 10 days. I didn't know these neighbors very well. Apparently, according to the obituary, the man had 10 kids. I found out from the paper that this man had suddenly passed away in his truck with his little dog. It made no sense. This man was in shape. He was on the rooftop of his house fixing roofs. He was building things in his kitchen all the time. He also worked as a carpenter, and the man was in great shape. So when I heard that, I couldn't believe it. Suddenly died of what? And I didn't find out. That was freaky in its own way. But then the military neighbor to run a horse farm. I'm sure she's enjoying her greener pastures where she is now. In the meantime, another tenant moved in. And this is where things take an even darker turn. This person moved in, and I was, again, outside grilling in my backyard. And he was looking for a dog that got off the chain or what have you. And he came up and introduced himself, and he said he knew me from my childhood. And I didn't recognize this person. I said, "Oh, who are you? You know, like, I don't know who you are." And he said he knew my entire family, that he goes to church with them, and that is true. My entire family goes to the same church with each other. I don't go, but they all do. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he said that they're the reason he got the house rental. He said that he was going to the church with them, and that they recommended him, and they helped him out because he was in a pinch from moving out quickly from another situation. He came with 3 dogs. He did something unusual though. He started training them to protect my yard, and I told him I didn't like that. I had dogs of my own at the time, and I said, please don't do that. I have a pit bull, and I also have a border collie, and they do a fine job of guarding my own yard. I don't need your dogs to do that. So on occasion, you know, it got pretty scary. He did have a bull mastiff and 2 pit bulls, and I love those dogs, but they started fiercely protecting me and my yard, and I was afraid that if my dogs ever got outside when they were in my yard, it could have been a catastrophe. So I politely just explained, please don't do that. Eventually, I noticed that he started bringing things around like boats, grills, trucks, cars, llamas, ostriches, turkeys. What else? I know I'm missing something. Pigs? Maybe a pig. No, I don't think he had a pig. Anyway, he started bringing like a whole farm around. I honestly didn't really think that was strange at first until I saw the 5 goats. So I said, how do you have room for all these animals? The yard isn't that big. I mean, I might have an animal or 2 sometimes, but I don't have a whole farm. Now, that property was at one time like 6 acres, but it was broken off in pieces over the years and sold off into lots for building. So when I saw that he was getting all these animals and accumulating all these animals, I thought to myself, what in the heck? Is this a hoarding situation? I wasn't sure. One day, he disappeared. I was like, where did this neighbor go? And I noticed the animals weren't being fed. As an animal lover, I couldn't believe that. I was like, okay, so I called my relatives that this man supposedly went to church with, and they did not know who I was talking about, never heard of him, didn't know why he would say their names, didn't know why he would say that he goes to church with them, didn't know why he said that they recommended him for this place to live at. So I was like, what is going on? So I became very concerned about this individual, and it wasn't typical of him to just go off like that and not anybody know where he was. He was here every single day. He was always attending to his animals. So it was really difficult to understand what had transpired and where he went. Plus having the other neighbor disappear for 10 days and then, you know, pass away. It was very, very concerning. But thankfully, I saw a car going up to the property, and I walked up over the hill, and I talked to the person who got out of the car, and apparently it was this person's relative. And they told me that he had gone away for a few days to clear his head, and he was here to feed the animals. And then I was like, oh, okay, good. Thankfully. I did notice a change in the neighbor over time. He became withdrawn. He started wearing a house robe out in his yard instead of being clothed. He was cleaning out pens, animal pens, in a house robe and slippers. And that was very strange to me. So I knew something was going on. He was deteriorating. I just didn't know, you know, what was happening. I tried to be supportive. I tried to be there for him in any way I could. But he really was becoming more and more a shut-in. And I could see this man going downhill. So eventually I stopped him one day when I saw him going down the road, and I just wanted to talk. I just see some things going on that don't seem like you, and I want to make sure you're okay. And he informed me that he didn't know what happened to the landlord, but there were some serious issues with the house. Things were happening with this house, and it was like rotting right before his eyes. He said there were holes in the roof, it was leaking, there was mold growing all over, the stairwell leading to the basement. Things were happening, and every time he tried to reach the landlord, this woman would text him in a very rude, condescending way. And I said, well, who is the woman? He said he didn't know. He said that he was unable to talk to the landlord. He hadn't heard from the landlord in months, so he decided to stop paying his rent. And I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea either, because then you stop paying your rent, you could be evicted, and you have all these animals to care for. So and I found out that the landlord died suddenly. The paper really didn't say anything about the cause of his passing away. It just said his name, his age, his wife's name, and that he had passed away. There was no other information. There was no information about a funeral. There was no information about anything. I saw my neighbor again, and I said, hey, I have some information that you might find interesting. I said, he passed away. The look on this man's face was total shock. He said, what do you mean he passed away? I said, yeah, he's no longer with us, unfortunately. I found the article in the paper, but it didn't give much information. I said, who is this woman texting you? What is her name? And he said, I don't know her name because she texts me from his phone number, but she doesn't ever say his name. She just said she's his wife. The next thing that happened was my neighbor got eviction paying him because A, he stopped paying his rent for 2 months, and B, because he had animals and she didn't allow it. He said the landlord's wife was now suing him, but his agreement was never with her. He had never met her. He didn't even know her. He didn't even know the landlord was married. That brings me back to, okay, so now we have a neighbor down the street disappearing for 10 days and passing away. Now we have the landlord disappearing and passing away. We have this guy disappearing, coming back, acting strange, these things bad happening to him. His roof has now got holes in it. It's leaking. He's got all this destruction in the property going on, and now he's being evicted. Eventually, he had to find a place for all of his animals. He did have help moving out the horde. And then one day, when the property lay vacant, nobody had been around for months. I woke up to a surprise in my yard. It was a bunch of dead animal heads. It was quite shocking, quite scary. Like I've said many times, I grew up on a farm. So when I saw this, I was like, this something ain't right about this. So I called animal control and I said, hi. I said, this is going to sound kind of silly, but there are a bunch of dead animal heads in my yard and I don't know how to dispose of them. I said, is it okay to throw them in the trash? I mean, what do you want me to do with these things? Animal control came out and she looked at them. Some of them had been burned, like burned alive. She eventually just took them, bagged them up, and I almost felt like this was some kind of ritualistic seance that happened with these animals. I'm not saying they were my neighbor's animals. I'm just saying that they appeared in my yard after he moved out. So that in itself was very creepy and strange. The next thing that happened was we were screening in our porches and we had a local handyman doing it who was in shape beyond belief. He was a Taekwondo master. I mean, he was also into weightlifting. He was strong, fit, healthy as an ox, no health problems whatsoever. He started building the screened-in porches, and soon after, one day, I was sitting in my living room, and I saw what I believe to be some type of shadowy figure. It wasn't in this person's shape at all. This guy was big, over 6 feet tall, broad shouldered, just muscle. And the shape of this shadowy figure was very thin and tall. But I noticed as it walked by, it kind of gave like a wave, like it was out of here. And I jumped out of my chair, like, what did I just see? Am I losing my mind? I ran out to tell my family who were in the backyard, and I said, I think I just saw a shadow figure. And I kind of laughed it off because I don't believe in that stuff. I do believe that demons exist. I do believe that things like that of nature, but I don't believe in ghosts that linger the earth after a soul dies. I don't believe that. So when I saw this, I actually was concerned, and I'm like, okay, am I losing it? What's going on? And the very next day, I got a phone call that my handyman passed away suddenly. So after experiencing all of these deaths near me and around this particular property, and the deaths had no explanation, none of them did. These people weren't old. These people weren't in bad health. It just seemed shocking to me. Like, I don't understand this. What is going on? In the meantime of all of this also occurring, a couple of years ago now, a young man in the neighborhood also went missing, and he's never been found. He's on the internet. He's in the FBI's list of children that have gone missing. He's on our local news. He's in our local police precinct's Facebook page. They just had a news thing recently bringing it back up and saying he's still missing. Growing up, my grandmother always told me about the burial cemetery in the backyard. She said early settlers have gravestones behind the red house on the hill. Because of all of these mysterious deaths, and because of all of these strange things that have occurred, and the people moving in here in this neighborhood, the strange things that happen to them, or the strange behaviors that they take on when they move here, I don't know, it's all too much. One of the houses in the neighborhood just blew up spontaneously. I don't think they ever really found the cause of it. I think they decided that maybe it was a gas leak or something. Thankfully, nobody was in the house when it blew up. It caused a catastrophic explosion. People died in that fire, although it was devastating because, of course, a family with little children lost their home and everything they had. It was rebuilt. A family bought it right away, moved in, and they left town. They left town before they even sold it. These are some things that have been going on in the neighborhood, and I often wonder, is it me? Did I bring something back from that automobile crash I witnessed? Is it something that occurred when my grandmother passed away? What are your thoughts about this? Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe that it's something unforeseen that we are not able to see with our naked eye? What's happening? That's my question. Like, do we need some paranormal researchers to come out? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Let me know. Thanks for watching.